Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Welcome into our Wednesday edition of the Minnesota Football Party. It's our Care 11 show. Reggie Wilson, Julia Daniels of Care 11 joining us, Ron Johnson as well. We'll talk to them in a moment. This is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first watch or listen today. And for your second one, check out Locked On Vikings with Luke Braun and find our audio on the Locked On Vikings podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. KOC and Kwesi spoke at the Combine yesterday. We react to their comments. What did we learn about the quarterback situation? We have Combine crushes on offense and defense. Are the Vikings officially a destination in free agency? And I've got a wild Matthew Stafford trade scenario to run across the group. But let's see what's on their minds. Let's go around the horn. Ron Johnson, kick it off.
I'm Ron Johnson, former Gophers wide receiver, NFL wide receiver. And I need to talk about, if you want to win a Super Bowl, there's a way to do it.
I'm Julia Daniels, Care 11 sports reporter. Guys, it's feeling pretty warm in Minneapolis right now. Spring is here, and that means, obviously, what are we talking about today? We got to talk about the draft coming up.
I'm Reggie Wilson, sports director at Care 11, and Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi, technicians at saying a whole lot, but leaving you wondering, what does it mean?
Oh, the subterfuge. Kevin O'Connell spoke for about 18 minutes yesterday. Kwesi for about 11. Not as long as I remembered. I thought Rick Spielman would go like half an hour, and you'd only ask 2 questions, and he would say nothing. So I guess there's a long line of GMs that know how to not talk. But here's my main take from both of them combined. I don't think I heard one time, and I still have yet to hear this, to be honest with you, from any offseason interview. Has it been uttered, we would like Sam Darnold back? I don't think I've heard that. I've heard we're having dialogue with Sam. We loved coaching Sam last year. I hear a lot about JJ. I hear a lot about how healthy JJ McCarthy is and how excited they are about him. I've yet to hear any kind of overture trying to woo Sam Darnold. If this is really a battle for Sam Darnold's affection, trying to get his heart to stay in Minnesota, please sign back with us, Sam. The Vikings are doing a terrible job of offering the proverbial bouquet. There's no little chocolates that they've wrapped up and extended to him. Their words do not reflect a team that wants to be reunited with Sam Darnold. They're okay with the one-night stand that they had, and they are done. They don't want to have breakfast. That's what I didn't hear yesterday. I did not hear a plea for Sam Darnold to return. Ron Johnson, what do you got?
Yeah, so when you look at Kevin O'Connell, he was on with K-Fan as well. And so some of the stuff he said, like if you look at all his quotes, the ones I'm focusing on are kind of like he said, I see a clear path to what we need to do. So clearly, because, think about year one of KOC. There was a lot of stuff said about Kirk Cousins. There was a lot of stuff said that left people wondering. I got called down to the office by the Minnesota Vikings because of a tweet after talking to Kwesi. So there was a lot of like smoke and mirrors of like, don't say this. Don't do this. You can't compare Tom Brady to Kirk Cousins because Kirk Cousins is sensitive. You're going to hurt his feel. Like there's a lot. So I think honestly, what you're seeing from KOC and Kwesi is just a backup of like how they were when they started. When they first got here, they were open books. They were talking a lot. They were saying a whole bunch of stuff. They were giving people like Twitter worthy like tweets. Oh, Kevin O'Connell says Kirk Cousins is no Tom Brady, but we'll work with him. They're learning you can't do that. And so that's what I'm feeling. Like when I listen to him and I'm breaking down, like, what did he want to say, but he couldn't say it? Because again, I've been in those meetings. I've sat in the studio. I've had PR come in when we have players and coaches in the room with us. And I heard the spiel. What they are doing is what PR has asked them to do was don't make our job harder than it has to be. Don't make us have to call that player and say, hey, sorry, he meant this way. But I do see the clear path comment, and I want to focus on that. The clear path comment, 14-3, we have a clear path. I know exactly what we need to do. I think it is the quarterback. I think he knows what he needs to do. Now, whether that's Sam Darnold's coming back and here's what we need to do with him, or we can get this done with JJ McCarthy. But at 14-3, the clear path he's talking about is the defense is set. We have a couple pieces we need to draft. Offensively, we are set besides maybe one or two pieces in the interior line. But we have both quarterbacks we want, but which one are we going with? So that's what I think they're just trying to like be cordial to both sides of the coin. There's a Sam Darnold side and there's a JJ McCarthy side. And you don't want to say something like, oh, we'd love to have Sam back. And then Sam's number is too high. And they're like, okay, we gotta go with JJ McCarthy. I think they're preparing for either way. And that's what they're trying to do, is not say anything until they know what they're going to do. So neither quarterback, either way they go, is pissed off.
Julie Daniels.
I think it's funny, Sam, because when I was listening to these pressers, I was taking some notes just about things that I picked up. And no one said they wanted Sam back. That's one of my notes on here, that they just said they appreciated what he did this season.
Every Sam on this earth just wants to be wanted. We want to be wanted. And, so I feel sympathy for him.
I thought that was interesting. Also, Kwesi's use of non-binary when it comes to the quarterback conversation.
Yeah, I thought that too.
I was like, okay, I mean, sure. I guess that's almost the perfect way to describe how they're talking about this. I think Ron is right in saying they're playing the political correctness game where they haven't made any kind of decision yet, so they don't want to push one way or the other and then have to backtrack and explain and this, that. But also, I still do think that it says something that they haven't been like, we would love Sam if he could come back, because it's not necessarily, I mean, no one's stupid here, right? Like, Sam's not stupid. I feel like maybe he would want to hear like, yeah, we want him back, but we just don't know how that will work out logistically for us. I don't think it's so much that like Sam is some big diva where if they say that they really would love to see him back and then it doesn't happen, he's going to be completely heartbroken and think you promised me something that didn't work out. But when I was listening to it, some other things that I picked up on, I might be reading too much into this as well, but Kevin O'Connell said, we loved the time that we had with Daniel Jones and the short time that he spent with us. And I thought that was an interesting way to talk about Daniel Jones, instead of saying, like he's in our quarterback room at the moment, or I know it's the off season, but I thought it was interesting the way that he worded it, where he was like, yeah, it was nice for him to come in and see the culture and see how things work and this, that, and the other. And it wasn't very much like he's a part of the team right now, is how that context felt to me when he was talking about Daniel Jones. But yeah, I think that was the number one thing that I had on my list, was no one said they wanted Sam back. Are we talking about some other things that we picked up from their pressers that they had too?
Yeah, let's hear what Reggie has, then we'll circle back with a couple final thoughts on this. Reggie, what's your number one takeaway?
So the number one takeaway that I have is, as I said earlier, they said a lot, but everything just seems so fluid. Like, they talked about Sam, they talked about JJ McCarthy enjoying where they felt like he was at this point. Apparently he's put on some weight and he's ready for the offseason program when it starts. The one thing that I think stuck out to me, though, was Kwesi really just kind of being a little transparent, maybe a little vulnerable, talking about just the process from his first draft up until now and how he feels like he can put things on a board and just like quantify, how much better that he's gotten up until this point. And so, I mean, you look at it, it's a guy who is not a football mind traditionally, and a guy who, really has leaned on the people around him to really kind of understand the game better. And I think one thing that he kind of let out that, maybe some were thinking was he would allow the metrics and the analytics to kind of dictate, like, hey, this player, look at these numbers. They're just off the charts, but not necessarily what a guy looks like on film and what he does on the field. And I think, maybe a little bit of that came to bite him a little bit in that first draft. You kind of think about, his draft crush being the cornerback from Missouri, and it didn't work out. I think that game against the Bengals last year was as bad a tape as you can get, just getting bullied by T. Higgins. And you're just like, man, Like, I think he had the best intentions, but I just don't know that the analytics met with the football of it all. And so I think, he was very transparent in showing and talking about how his process has gotten better, and he feels that he's better, because if he's not getting better, then he's not going to be in that job long.
I'd feel the pressure if I was Kwesi on the draft, simply because there's a lot of criticism about his drafting. He doesn't have that new contract, which is probably a good, discussion point for another show. Oh, and by the way, you've got one pick in the first 90. You get one chance to really get an impact player. And then you've got 3 more. It's a very small draft class for the Vikings, and Kwesi's got a lot of pressure on him to make an impact with that small class. Julia, I think you had some other notes. I've got one more I wanted to mention too, but Julia, what else do you have?
I thought it was interesting how Kwesi was asked about running backs. Obviously, that's been a big question mark too for this draft, and he didn't seem particularly excited about running backs, and he wasn't willing to put a lot of value or emphasis on it. He was asked like 2 or 3 questions about, with the season that running backs had this year in the NFL, do you think that they will be considered of more value in this draft? Will it be different this year? And he just kind of gave it wasn't even necessarily a non-answer either. It was more of like I don't think that that's for me to say. And I was like, I feel like you of all people are one to be able to comment on this, where you think that's at. So I just found it interesting that he wasn't particularly excited to talk about. And I don't know if that means that he's trying to be a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Nonchalant about it, so that maybe there's not so much chatter about running backs, so that maybe they have better opportunity for it. But I found that interesting that he just was kind of, it was almost like he felt a little deflated when he was talking about the running backs and asked about the value of them because of Derrick Henry's year and Saquon Barkley's year. And I found that interesting. And then one other thing that I found interesting was just Kevin O'Connell's talk about the versatility of offensive linemen nowadays, and how they've kind of evolved, where they don't have to just stick in one spot, but they can play, all 5 or whatever. So when you go in, you kind of look at them a little differently than maybe you did in years past when it comes to drafting an offensive lineman, where it's not just where they have him listed, but you could look at him in different spots and they would absolutely be capable of it. But I think that the Kwesi thing about running backs kind of stuck out to me a little bit more than that did.
Yeah. He was like, well, Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley are Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
so I don't know
exactly.
I don't know if it's a rule necessarily as much as it is kind of an exception. I found it interesting too that the Vikings are interviewing Ashton Genty, who is probably the consensus number 1 back. Would be shocked if he's around at 24. That would be surprising to me. But again, people trying to chase after a Saquon type player. I think they're going to be drafting Genty long before the Vikings pick. But I did think that was interesting. One thing that stood out to me back in the quarterback is when Kevin O'Connell said, hey, the league knows now that Sam Darnold is a good player, that he can play in this league, which reminded me, similar to the Kirk Cousins conversation a year ago, not that the league was learning about Kirk, but that Kevin O'Connell was laying the groundwork and saying, hey, it's a competitive market out here. A lot of people want this guy's services, almost beginning to sort of make the excuse of, well, there's a reason we're not going to get him back, because a lot of people are willing to pay a lot of money. That to me was code for, yeah, he's going to hit the market and we're not going to be able to afford him. Other takeaways from Reggie or Ron in closing here in segment 1?
I just wanted to say, like, the one that got me too was when Kwesi was asked by one of the reporters, he said, are you guys close to extending Darnold or franchising him? And again, I think he's playing that game of the quarterback, because he didn't say he didn't want him and he didn't say he did. He just said, we have been afforded options. And he said, that's what we wanted to. He called it optionality, actually. But he said they created optionality by drafting a quarterback and having a really good quarterback in their building. And that's where I truly believe they are in the middle of this. Like, they don't want to tip their hand. They don't want to let any team know, because if they do franchise them and then trade them, because 3 picks, I mean, honestly, they can't make it to the draft with 3. If they make it to the draft with 3 picks, oh my goodness. 1, because I know we're doing some work for them, it's going to be a boring day. But 2, I don't think they're going to do that. I do truly believe they're looking at all their options to be able to get a draft pick. And I think the best one is franchising Sam Darnold and then trading him to get some draft picks.
Reggie, final thoughts?
Yeah, I just can't see that, just because you're assuming a lot of risk there, like that another team is going to, pay what it is. But I do, Ron, to your point, and Sam, to your point, I do think that the Vikings are, playing chess with this thing, just because this process is going to play out both short-term and long-term for the Minnesota Vikings. Again, you're like, what does that mean? And then he's like, Sam is in a position where the NFL thinks he can play quarterback at a high level. That's a really good thing. And I feel proud to be a part of helping him get to this point. We'll see where it goes from here. And it's just like, okay, all right. But I think he is positioning, other teams to step up and give Sam Darnold the bag. And I think that almost, to me, felt like a goodbye almost. It was like, a lot of teams think Sam could play at a high level, and it's because of me. And I feel proud of that. We'll see what happens
He
to
almost
him.
slapped himself on the back.
I know it was
wanted
very
to.
subtle. It was very subtle. But Ron, if that did happen, I would almost be shocked. Just because, like, I feel like the Vikings don't necessarily have leverage. And I think that comment from Kevin O'Connell was like a way for the Vikings to try to, gain some leverage. And, even with Kwesi being like, hey, like, trying to weigh this Pro Bowl quarterback with the fact that he had 8 quarters of football that was regrettable is tough to weigh for me. And I think, they would love for teams to look at the 14 wins and not the other losses that really kind of didn't show Sam in the best light.
Yeah, no, I think that's the goal.
Yeah. When we return, more Combine talk, and we'll talk about the players actually reporting to the Combine. Who are our Combine crushes? One offense, one defense. That's next after a very short pause. Minnesota Football Party. All right, rolling on. Minnesota Football Party. We're glad you're with us, and we'll be back tomorrow with Arif Hassan, Luke Braun, and Luke Inman on tomorrow's edition. All right, Combine crushes. There were like 329 players invited to this thing, and I'm asking you to boil it down to one offense, one defense. Reggie, kick us off. Who are your Combine crushes you want to see in purple?
All right, so just my Combine crush overall, because I just love this guy, is Luther Burden. Not a need for the Vikings, obviously, but my Mizzou guy from the same place where I'm from, he's going to be a dynamic receiver in the NFL. That's just okay. Full stop.
Give him a quarterback, please.
I know. That was his problem. But anyway, moving on. We'll go on offense. And I do agree with Ron. Like, I just don't see the Vikings being able to just cook with 3 draft picks, like 1 and 2 5s. Like, it just okay. But say they do, okay? On offense, I think maybe someone they can get in the 5th round is running back Corey Kiner. And so, full disclosure, I covered Corey in high school at Roger Bacon in Cincinnati. He was a former Ohio Mr. Football, but he was a kid who would take a handoff and he'd be gone. Like, you give him a handoff at the 10 and he'd take it 90 to the house for a touchdown. He could return kicks, he could return punts, and he was just a dynamic running back. Went to LSU, didn't necessarily work out there, transferred back home to the University of Cincinnati, and all he did was have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. 4 touchdowns in one, 5 touchdowns in the other. But this is why I like him. He is an older back. He's 23. But I like him because he had back-to-back 1,000-yard years, but You're talking about 194 carries one year, 204 carries the other year. Like, he doesn't have a whole lot of mileage. He did in high school, and then it seems like it kind of took a little bit of a step back in his collegiate years. And so he's a guy who has some burst. He has some good size as well. He's kind of a big back, but he has the speed to be a 3-down back in the NFL. And so I think that he could be a value for the Vikings in the 5th round. So that's offense.
Like it.
On defense, I don't know that he's going to be there when the Vikings pick or not, but one of my crushes is Will Johnson, Michigan. And you look at a guy who is a 4-4 guy at 6'2", he's like that prototype cornerback that you love to see. He has the size, he has the necessary speed, and he's a physical guy that you could put on the outside. This is somebody that, maybe, and I may be overstepping here because he hasn't played in the NFL yet, but they signed Stephon Gilmore last year to kind of be that long, like, physical cornerback for them. And this guy could come in and be cornerback 1, day 1. And so you look at maybe trying to sign Byron Murphy back to play that slot, and then you sign a guy who could be like your I hate that I keep putting these names out there, but he could be like your Richard Sherman on the outside, where you're like, you know what, just put him on the island and let him cook. Like, he's a guy who can cover the best receivers on the other side, and he also has playmaking ability to be able to pick it and take it to the house as well. So not sure he'll be there when the Vikings pick, and if they don't get him in the 1st round, then they don't get him at all. But he's my crush on the defensive side.
Yeah, Sauce Gardner, like, impact probably for him his rookie year. I don't know. He might need to there might need to be some occurrence off the field that makes him drop to number 24. I don't know if he's getting past the top 10, let alone 24. Great.
He might not make it past 3.
Yeah. Ron, you love him. You love Will Johnson.
Well, I mean, his dad went to my high school, so I've known like Deion Johnson's his pops, played at Michigan, went to Martin Luther King High School. And so I've known Will since he was a kid. And yeah, like, he's better than Travis Hunter, in my opinion. Like, he's a better corner, a true corner than Travis Hunter. Like, when you watch him play, I mean, I watched Travis Hunter play, and I watched Will play. We did a full breakdown of Will. And like, even when you watch him against the Gophers, and I think that was the game Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi were at 2 years ago, and started the game with a pick 6. Yeah. Like, it was just like, I had talked about him. I mean, Sam, you remember that? I talked about him. And then what do? Don't throw late to Will Johnson's side. What did they do? Threw late to Will Johnson's side. You don't do that. Like, Travis Hunter is good, but Will Johnson is a true cornerback. Like, he thinks nothing but corner. Travis Hunter is TikTok and receiver, and where's Dion at? Is my girlfriend at my house, or she at did Future show up with his Gucci flip-flops to my girlfriend's house? Like, it's just way too much going on with Travis Hunter. I think Will Johnson, if I'm a GM, I'm probably picking Will Johnson over Travis Hunter.
Ron, you want to turn that into your other crushes, your non-Will Johnson crushes?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I love the Aston Genty meeting with the Vikings, but I don't think he'll be there. If I'm going to go running back, I'm going Caleb Johnson. When you watch him out of Iowa, the kid, like, creates separation. He falls forward. He reminds me of, like, when you think about big, powerful 6'2", 225-pound running backs, like, he's the guy that was gonna, like, get you 2 to 3 yards every time. You give him the ball twice, you're in 3rd and 3 every time, or 3rd and 4. When you watch Iowa football, Iowa did not know what a forward pass was. Iowa football, if you put it in black and white, you could not tell me that wasn't 1980. They never threw the ball. Their offensive coordinator was still drinking a bottle from daddy's hands, and that's why they fired him. But Caleb Johnson kept Iowa alive. Like, Cooper DeJean, great. Illegal fair catch, love it. But Caleb Johnson is the reason why that offense and that team ended up where they did every year. And so I wouldn't mind that one. Defensively, like, I really like the kid out of Michigan. And when you think about his size, Kenneth Grant, he played next to Mason Graham, and that's always going to be the conversation. Did Mason Graham make Kenneth Grant better? I don't care. The kid is 340 pounds, and that's what I want to see on that defensive line, and he'll be there in the 30s even. So he could be a situation, and same with the running backs. I don't think anybody wants to really take a running back in the first round. So Caleb Johnson is probably going to be there in that Dalvin Cook spot in the second round. I would trade the first round pick and try to get a second and a third. Like, you got to do something with that first round pick to create more picks. And I think a second and third round pick for this, because this team doesn't need a first round pick. Like, they are 14-3 team. You don't need a first round pick. They technically could have had the 30th pick if they actually like could stop somebody in the red zone and their quarterback could just throw to an open guy in the last couple games. But that's the difference. Is if you think about the 30th pick, it's the same as the 35th pick. I would trade that 20 something for somebody that really wants to go up and get their guy. And I would say, give me your second and your third. And now I've created draft capital to go get a Caleb Williams, or sorry, get a Kenneth Mason. And then Caleb Williams might still be there, because I don't think running backs are going to come off the board high, especially senior running backs. Like, that's the problem, is if you're not Bijan Robinson and you're in your 19, 20, like when you're 3, 4, 5 years into college, you've been beat up. So, and of course, Max Brosmer. Like, Max Brosmer is there. I knew nobody was going to say that one. I would love to see Max Brosmer be a third quarterback for the Vikings, be able to come into camp. And after the Shrine game, the conversation around him actually grew. His combine invite came out of nowhere because he was not on the original list. He was added late. And there's another kid out of Apple Valley, Bilal Kone. He's from Apple Valley, Minnesota. He took the hard route. Kid went to JUCO. He went to like prep school. He did everything possible and finally got an opportunity to get into a D1 football program. And now he's at the combine. So he's a cornerback, tall, long. I can see the Vikings, if they can find a 7th round pick somewhere, somehow trade, their future away and get a guy like that. I'd love to see it, but I don't know if he'll be there that late. I think he's a 5th to 7th round pick, but he could fit in that Marcus Sherrill's role at corner, which means you're just coming in to be a 6 DB, but really good kid from Minnesota.
You guys just want Big Ten guys that cooked the Gophers. That seems to be the theme here. Will Johnson, Caleb Johnson. Julia, do you have more guys that made the Gophers look silly?
No, sorry. We're going SEC here. Of course. It's funny because besides being on the podcast, but I feel like I missed a few weeks here in the early spring. I feel like we've been so hockey oriented here lately that I hadn't even thought about a lot of draft stuff until I was on K-Fan a few weeks ago, and they mentioned Tyler Booker, because who they always go to, Meat Sauce, about all their sports things, right? And he's like, Tyler Booker. And then he looked at me.
Tyler Booker wails. I love Tyler Booker.
He wails, yeah. He brought him up, and I was looking into it. I was thinking about it. I will say, so if you looked at mock drafts last week compared to this week, now that the combine has happened, Tyler Booker is not projected to go to the Vikings at all anymore. He was listed probably 5 or 6 times last week. I still obviously have high hopes that a Bama guy will come to the Vikings. Always here for that, right? But I think that he is part of what Kevin O'Connell was talking about when it comes to the versatility of offensive linemen now. He played in 2 different offenses. He only started for 2 years. Granted, this kid was born in 2004, right? So he's only 20 years old. And I think he's like 6'5", over 300 pounds, huge kid. But he's played under 2 different offenses and excelled in both of them. When Tommy Reese was offensive coordinator, then obviously Kalen DeBoer takes over. Kalen DeBoer has a way more complicated offense for this guy to play in, and he excelled even more in that. And they also moved him around on the line a little bit too, during different games, and he excelled in every position there. So I think I would love to see Tyler Booker come here. I think that he is a need. A player like him is something that the Vikings need right now. Do I think he's going to be available for them? I don't. I would be surprised if he was. I also thought it was interesting too when Kevin O'Connell was talking about the offensive line yesterday, and the reporter asked and said, when you talked about replacing the offensive line, and he's like, I didn't use the word replace, okay? I didn't use the word replace, but we all know that there obviously needs
we just want to cut all of them and make them better. But I didn't say replace.
we just want to keep Christian Darrisaw around. So I think that it would be phenomenal if they could get a guy like Tyler Booker, but I unfortunately don't think that that's going to happen for them. I do think when I was looking at the mock draft that Jahdae Barron from Texas is an excellent choice for the Vikings. And I think that he would fit really well into a Brian Flores defense because he's so versatile. It would be nice to have somebody, so he's a cornerback, right? It would be nice to have somebody as a cornerback that's a little bit like Josh Metellus in that he can kind of be a Swiss Army knife in that sense. And I think when I'm looking at what they're writing when they're evaluating him, it says he has a lot of potential to cross-train as a safety, which would be really great for the Vikings to have in their defense. I also think that he's got the aggression that Brian Flores really likes to see out of his guys, and I think that he would fit in really well in that sense. And also, they talk a lot about his instincts too, which is something that Brian Flores loves to just let his guys go out there, trust their instincts, understand what's going on, and play the game without too many plans in order, right? And so I think that Jahdae Barron would fit really well into Brian Flores' defense, and I think that he'd be a great pickup for them. He's not terribly big for a corner. I think he's listed as 5'11", which means he's might not even be 5'11". But I do think that he would be a really great pickup for them at 24. So.
Yeah, I love Jahdae Barron. Kind of a late bloomer, 5-year Texas guy. And I think he could be available at 24. Now, the guy I'm going to talk about, a corner, may or may not be available. I don't think we know yet. We got to see how the board falls. You got Travis Hunter. You got Will Johnson. They're the top 2 corners off the board. Then arguably number 3 is Benjamin Morrison. He's a younger guy, 3 years at Notre Dame, hasn't turned 21 yet. Insane coverage numbers. He's allowed like 45% completion percentage in his career. Passer rating when thrown his way is 44. Just insanely good. He's 6 foot, $190, just a pure coverage corner. Now, he missed half of last season with a hip injury, so we didn't get to see him in the college football playoff. That would have been a nice evaluation tool to see him against the Ohio States and the Georgias of the world. Didn't get that opportunity. But I think he's going to be there middle of the first round. Does he fall to 24? I think there's a chance. Depends how he tests. If he proves that he's back healthy from that injury, I could see him going off too early. But if he's there at 24, you got to consider Benjamin Morrison. Lastly, I would toss out a possible day 3 running back, Jordan James out of Oregon. Crazy fast. I mean, you get Jahmyr Gibbs vibes when you watch this guy on tape. Crazy speed, shiftiness. He can go from 0 to 60 in like 2 strides. Fluid in the passing game. I would love him in the building in day 3. Now, why is he a day 3 pick? Why isn't he like a first-round type prospect? A little undersized. Maybe not as patient or disciplined as a running back yet. But I would take a flyer on him for sure. Jordan James, classic fast Oregon guy. I mean, Kenyon Barner vibes when you watch him. Those are our draft crushes. When we return, I've got a couple questions for the group, including, are the Vikings a destination in free agency? That's next on the Minnesota Football Party. We are brought to you today by FanDuel. The NBA is back in full swing. No better place to get in the action than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Lakers-Mavs, highly entertaining. Last night, Lakers had the cover. Lakers-Wolves play tomorrow night. No, Reggie's going to be tuned in. You can bet that game at FanDuel before the game or during the game. So many live wagering options at FanDuel. If you think a team's going to make a late comeback, you can bet their live money line and cash in big. You can take the live over-under. That's always a lot of fun. Also, combine live bets in a same-game parlay live edition. That's always a lot of fun as well. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Ron Johnson, Julia Daniels, Reggie Wilson, and I'm Sam Ekstrom. Ron, I've got a question for you. Are the Vikings a free agent destination based on the culture that they've established under Kevin O'Connell? Going into free agency with a lot of money, a lot of big free agents that they could try to pursue. Do you think that those guys want to come to Minnesota because of what KOC's built?
So I'd say yes. So when you think about the 14-3-1, but then the biggest is, and we had her on our show, Sam, Quinn Jersvik, her with the families with Lee O'Connell and Chelsea Adofo-Mensah. They talked about how when the families visit, so Jonathan Grenard, I don't know if you remember that story. Jonathan Grenard, when he first came to visit, I was down there doing some radio stuff in the VN studio. He came in with his wife and kid, and they were just talking about like how Blake Cashman was, potentially signing, or I think he had already signed maybe. I can't remember exactly the timing of how that worked, if it was him first then Blake or vice versa. But he talked about how Blake Cashman talked about Minnesota the whole time they were in Houston, and then he talked about how they received him. And that's huge. When you have your family being like, his wife was able to just walk through the facility with the baby. And I get it. Like, it's like a recruiting visit. Everybody wants to make it great when you first get there. But then you hear guys like Harrison Smith talk about it, how, like the staff has been to his wife and his kid. You talk, you get the grades from these are anonymous grades. So you could bash the heck out of your team if you wanted to, and your name never gets brought up by the NFLPA. But 90, I think it was 93 or 94% of the players all kind of said, yeah, this is an A+ place you want to work. The facilities, the handling of the players, the food. Like, I didn't realize how important food was, where some teams don't provide good food. And so all of that, yes, I would say it's a huge destination. Other than the weather, and Julia made a great point, it's 50 degrees, free agents. So all you free agents out there, is 50 degrees right now. You like the ice skates are being put away unless you're going indoors and you're still playing hockey right now.
It's nicer up here than it is in Florida.
And Kentucky, like Kentucky's having mudslides and snow and rain, and like, come on now, people, like, let's get here. And so in California, I mean, do you really want to be in LA with all the fires? Like, come to Minnesota. But yeah, no. So I'd say yes, Sam. Like, it is a destination, and it's the culture too. Like, and I loved Jim Harbaugh. I keep telling him John. Jim Harbaugh's comment. What's his name? Florio was trying to make Jim Harbaugh to this great culture, and Jim's like, the culture was good here. He said the difference was I came in and the players trusted me to do what I do. And I think that's the big thing. Like, some places don't have a culture, and I think the Vikings had a culture already too. I just think like within the facility, but I think Kevin O'Connell came in and said, this is how you run an offense, because that was the problem. A defensive coordinator was always going to focus on defense, and the offense was an afterthought. It's not the same here. Both the defense, because Brian Flores is running it as a former head coach, and the offense are getting both are getting love. So if I'm a player coming here, I don't feel like I'm coming here and like one side of the ball is more important than the other. I think Zimmer made the Vikings feel like defense is the defense. And then, hey, if you want to be a quarterback here, or hey, if you want to possibly be a running back or receiver here, hey, just come on. We need you because we got to score, but my defense is going to win this for us. You don't have that in Minnesota. It's not like Kevin O'Connor's like, oh, my offense is great. I just need a couple people. It's both sides of the ball. So all the free agents do feel loved, and I do think it's a destination. Like, you want to be somewhere where you are respected and where you're not going to be called like a piece of crap behind your back, or, there's a lot of weird organizations out there.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, and nothing against Antonio Brown. Like, if he hadn't done what he did, he'd be a Hall of Famer. Because if you look at his numbers to Calvin Johnson, but Antonio Brown, now again, mentally unstable, but doing a video like, I'm free, like, and Zach Wilson saying like, I don't have any more problems because I'm not with the Jets anymore, or the Giants. Like, there's some bad, and I'm not saying bad, like bad, just like fundamentally bad. Like the Raiders, the Jets, the Giants, like guys are like, I'm not going there. Like, I just listened to people talk about that recently, and players, Paul Pierce of all people, but him and Keyshawn Johnson were talking about Micah Parsons. Like, why would you want to go to some of these places that want you? It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Myles Garrett, not Micah Parsons. Myles Garrett.
Yeah, but there were weird vibes with Micah Parsons too. With Mike Zimmer. Reggie, the Vikings check.
Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, yep. The Vikings check like every box, right? They've got the new facility, they've got the new stadium, number one organization in the NFLPA survey, number one game day experience on Sundays, as they were recently voted. Coach that cares, coach that has not had any, scandalous accusations. Like there's just a lot. There's a lot going for the Vikings right now, organizationally.
Yeah, I think that survey did a lot as well, just kind of making it become a destination place. But even talking to guys like Aaron Jones, he's like, man, even being on the other side when we would always go to Minnesota and I'd hear the fans doing the Skol chant, I was just like, man, that's nice. I'd like to be a part of that. And he came and just by all accounts loved his experience here. And we haven't heard of any free agent really coming here, especially since Kevin O'Connell has been in the building. We haven't heard of any free agent coming here and not enjoying their experience. And so I do think, you have a guy who, and Kevin O'Connell is a player's coach, a guy that people love playing for. You have a organization that by all accounts seems very supportive. And I think people just come here and just have a good time. Like Harrison Phillips was one of the first free agents that they signed in this new regime, if you will. And he loves it. He's on the boat in the summertime. He built a house. He's starting a family here. Like he loves it here. And I think I saw JG, Jonathan Grenard, he got a house built. Like he's enjoying himself here. Like this is a place where people want to come and people want to enjoy themselves. I mean, I think it speaks a lot to Daniel Jones. I think Julia and I were talking about this on Care 11 Sports Plus, but like Daniel Jones is like, get me out of here. Get me out of New York. I don't care what the situation is. I got to go. Get me out of here. I want to go to Minnesota. And that probably did wonders for his career. He may come back. He may come back for next season to battle it out with J.J. McCarthy. And so I think that speaks a lot. The survey is huge. And then the fan experience is also huge. Guys like to play where people care about what they're doing. And that is evident here by all accounts.
Yeah, Julia, it's refreshing. It's refreshing when you've got a market that, in the NBA, people overlook Minnesota. No one wants to play here. In baseball, you've got the cheap owners. And in football, it kind of feels like the Vikings, in some sense, they are right in the mix, right? Yeah. They really are kind of at the center of the NFL universe, it seems.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just to kind of reiterate what you guys were talking about earlier, I have spent time with some of the players' families, and they are so happy with the Vikings. They're so content with how things work. They feel it's not, and it's, Ron was talking about how they treated Jonathan Grenard's family, or when they came in, the team doesn't just listen to what the player has to say, but they also accommodate to their wives, their kids, what they feel like they need. They built that entire apartment complex out there, and the guys just live across the street because a lot of them don't live here full time, right? And so they have these accommodations that they've put together to make sure that everybody feels at home, everyone's comfortable. So I think it's been also a culture, and I kind of hate that that's become such a buzzword lately, but it is something that Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi have really worked to build. And the fact that you could have so many almost random free agents come in this past season and then have a guy like Josh Metellus say that this is the closest group he's ever been a part of before when the season comes to an end says everything about what the Vikings have done with their organization and what they try to build. And I think that they recognize maybe more than, and you're talking about Micah Parsons. I mean, I grew up a Cowboys fan. I don't think Jerry Jones is listening to his players about what they particularly want. I think it's just about whatever Jerry Jones wants, right? That's kind of how that works. The Wilfs, not so much. I think that the Wilfs care about, they genuinely care because they know that that's what builds success in an organization and with a team. And so I think that you are seeing that. I think it's the NFL. So like competition's always going to be top tier, but this is how nowadays you build a successful organization is by creating a culture that players want to be a part of. And Reggie is right. We did talk about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones called up the Vikings. He wanted to be there. He knew that something good was going on in Egan. He was interested in that. And so I think that speaks volumes about what they've been able to build in such a short amount of time too. And so I hate to use the saying, but it feels like it's only up from here in terms of how well things are going and how happy players are to be in Minnesota.
All right, we're going to end with a wild trade scenario. This is where trades get discussed, right? The GMs, the coaches, they sit around the table in the private room at St. Elmo's, and they hash this stuff out. Matthew Stafford's reportedly unhappy with his contract. He wants out of L.A., and the Rams are willing to entertain that. Would you trade J.J. McCarthy for Matthew Stafford straight up? Pay Matthew Stafford what he wants. Reggie, give me an answer.
No, you're trading your future, a guy that you love, for a guy that may only have 1 or 2 years left. He's 37. No, you don't, unless you're just like, you know what? We have a position to make it to the Super Bowl with the roster that we have and the cap space and all that. Let's just do the deal, and then we'll worry about the future in the future, which kind of goes against the whole competitive rebuild type thing. But you don't do that. Also, this whole thing with the Rams just doesn't even make sense to me, because Stafford brought you guys within like half a drive away from beating the eventual Super Bowl champions in the snow.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were a team that nobody really wanted to play when the playoffs started. And we saw that wagon, how Jared Verse was just like jumping all over Sam Darnold in the Superman pose. Like, nobody really wanted to play this Rams team, and they've had a lot of success with Stafford. The guy took you to a Super Bowl. What are we doing? Why is this? I would think that Stafford could ask for a blank check and they just say, okay, yeah, we'll give it to you.
You're making Stafford sound like a pretty good quarterback, Reggie. I don't know. Maybe
he is.
I get it, though. You don't want to run your organization on Hail Marys. And the Vikings have had kind of weird success doing this in the past, whether it's Brett Favre or Randall Cunningham. Like they've taken big swings at quarterbacks before, or they've had surprising quarterbacks come in and lead them to success. But I don't think that's how you want to operate, is to throw all your eggs in that basket, because it's going to cost you so much money. Julia, where are you at with this?
I'm in agreement with Reggie. No. No, this guy's in the sunset of his career. And you've got J.J. McCarthy, who you've not even really given a chance yet. This is the guy you talked about being the face of your franchise. No, I don't think that makes any sense. Otherwise, you would, let's not compare. Okay, I was going to compare Kirk and Matthew Stafford. There's not a comparison there. But I think that the Vikings are more interested in younger guys when it comes to their quarterback position right now. And I don't think that I don't think that makes any sense at all.
I will say, Julia, if you take out the Super Bowl run, it would be a Kirk Cousins situation. This is how much credibility you gain when you win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because Matt Stafford's playoff resume stinks, other than that one run. Other than that, I think he's 1-5. And he has one Super Bowl run mixed in there. And that totally changes the equation and the leverage and to what he thinks he's owed, which I guess that makes sense. Ron,
that he's owed.
Yeah. He wants like a $10 million per year raise. It sounds like $50 million per year on average. Big number. Ron, where are you at with this?
I'm old enough to remember the J.G. Wentworth commercials that, if you want your cash now, that's what you do if you call Matthew Stafford. Call Matthew Stafford if you want to win now. Like, that's the only way you can guarantee, you know what? With my weapons, with this team, with that quarterback, he probably gets us over the hump. But then you're going to end up like the Rams, selling everything off. And and so some people would say, I would trade it all for one Super Bowl appearance. And you could get there. There's a chance. You literally have the pieces. You have the people. Matthew Stafford, though, at this age now, like if this was 4 years ago, I'd be gun-ho. 3 years ago, probably gun-ho. Now, I'm not 100% bought in. I still think he has a lot left in the tank, but his lack of movement when you watch him, I mean, he diced up the Vikings though, but his lack of movement, and then his wife. Like, I don't think anybody wants her jumping on Vikings podcast stuff, like making comments and like ruining the culture, because I feel like that's what she's doing. I think, like she's wearing out her welcome. Everybody doesn't need a microphone, and we're learning that in 2025. But no, I mean, I kind of would do it if you're like, look, this is a Super Bowl waiting to happen. I'd do it, but you're going to waste so much money on him, and you're going to leverage your entire, like, you're going to ruin the rest of Justin Jefferson, and again, some people are saying, look, it's worth it to get a Super Bowl. It's worth it. And then let's tear the whole thing up. But I think JJ McCarthy in 2 to 3 years, he'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Kwesi has said he wants to give his team the best chance to get there multiple years in a row, give them multiple shots, not to go all in, not to go, and Kwesi used this phrase, not to go full Rams, quote unquote. That was his controversial quote back in 2022. It'd be going full Rams if you traded for the Rams quarterback. Quite literally, it would be. I know that there's the KOC Stafford connection. I know they won a Super Bowl together. It would just go against everything organizationally that they've been working toward, which is financial freedom, which they now have. It's within their clutches, and building around a quarterback of the future. I think that's the direction they're going to go. I don't think it's going to be Darnold. I don't think it's going to be Stafford. I think we all agree that it's probably going to be JJ McCarthy this coming year. We still have a couple weeks until that gets established, and we'll be with you every step of the way right here in the Minnesota Football Party right now, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. The Ron Johnson Show on Tuesdays with more great Vikings content. We appreciate our viewers, our listeners, our commenters, and our subscribers at Locked On Sports Minnesota. Find our audio in the Locked On Vikings podcast feed. We appreciate you watching today, and we'll be back tomorrow on the Minnesota Football Party.